When a man lives a double life, something fascinating happens in his brain. The unconscious simply cannot hold the secret for long. Sigmund Freud spent decades studying this phenomenon and discovered something revolutionary. Everything we try to hide with all our might ends up leaking out in unexpected ways through our behavior. It's like trying to hold water with punctured hands. The male mental apparatus, when divided between two romantic realities, begins giving involuntary signals that are impossible to control completely. These signals aren't deliberate. They're like screams from the unconscious, begging for help, because it can no longer bear carrying so much emotional weight alone. Look, if you're watching this right now and feeling like this information makes total sense with what you're experiencing, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Leave a like too, because this isn't just about numbers. It's about getting this content to other people who are completely lost, thinking they're going crazy. The more people interact here, the more the algorithm will understand that this type of information needs to be spread. Do it real quick now, and let's continue unraveling the mysteries of the male mind when there's betrayal. The first thing psychoanalysis reveals about infidelity is the way the man starts dealing with his phone. And look, I'm not talking about using the phone a lot. Everyone uses it plenty nowadays. The issue is the change in behavioral pattern. Freud said our defense mechanisms are like automatic shields the mind creates to protect itself from anxieties we can't handle facing. When betrayal happens, the cell phone becomes the center of all these shields working simultaneously. Let's pay attention to details. That man who used to leave his phone lying around anywhere in the house now carries the device even to go to the bathroom. This isn't a conscious decision like, I'll take my phone because I have something to hide. It's his unconscious in maximum alert mode all the time. The primitive part of the brain, the one that's been detecting dangers since caveman days, is working in overdrive, constantly scanning the environment for any situation that might expose the truth. Here comes a brilliant discovery by Freud. Our body speaks, even when our mouth is silent. The so-called Freudian slips, those blunders that seem silly but reveal deep truths. When the phone rings or vibrates, watch his body reaction carefully. There's a micro-startle, an instant tension that lasts fractions of a second. The muscles around the eyes contract, breathing changes for a moment, sometimes even skin color alters slightly. All this happens before the rational brain even processes who's calling. It's pure response from the autonomic nervous system reacting to the danger of being discovered. And there's another interesting thing. Security codes that appear out of nowhere. That phone that had no password or you knew what it was now has a complex locking system. When you ask why, there comes a vague excuse about security or work requirements. But the unconscious is saying something else. It's creating physical barriers to protect a forbidden emotional territory. Freud would explain this as the mind trying to create concrete separation between the two lives the man is living. The phone's positioning also tells a fascinating story. Pay attention. When you're together, the device is always facing down. Always. Without exception. This is what we call, in psychoanalysis, anticipatory defensive behavior. His brain is so accustomed to operating in protection mode that it automatically positions the phone face down to prevent any compromising notification from appearing on the screen. He's not thinking consciously, I'm going to put my phone face down so she doesn't see anything. So his psychic apparatus is doing it automatically because it's in survival mode. Freud taught us that the ego, that part of our mind that mediates between our primitive desires and social reality, goes through immense exhaustion when it needs to sustain contradictory narratives. Every interaction with the phone in the official partner's presence represents a moment of potential collapse of the defensive structure. The cognitive load of remembering which lie was told, which version of events was shared, which excuse was given becomes overwhelming. And when something is overwhelmed, it starts failing. Another revealing element emerges in how he handles phone calls when he's with you. Before, he would answer normally, sometimes even putting it on speaker if it was something unimportant. Now he gets up and goes to another room to answer calls that supposedly are from work or a friend. And when he comes back, there's something in his energy that has changed. He's more distracted, more irritable, or strangely more affectionate, as if compensating for something. The psychoanalytic theory explains this through what Freud called reaction formation, a defense mechanism where the ego expresses the opposite of what it truly feels to keep unacceptable impulses repressed. That exaggerated affection after a suspicious phone call? It's the unconscious trying to balance the guilt scale. The irritability, it's the mental exhaustion of maintaining the facade cracking through. Watch also how he manages the phone during intimate moments. Previously, it could be anywhere. On the nightstand, in another room, wherever. Now, even during moments that should be about complete presence and vulnerability, the phone is strategically placed within his line of sight. Or conversely, it's completely hidden away, turned off, because the anxiety of being discovered in such a vulnerable moment is too intense for the psychic apparatus to handle. The second psychological manifestation that Freud's theories help us understand involves unexplained transformations in routine and availability. This signal is fascinating from a psychoanalytic perspective because it reveals how the mind needs to create physical and temporal spaces to sustain a fragmented existence. The unconscious cannot operate in two places simultaneously, so the conscious mind must manufacture reasons, justifications, and explanations for absences. Suddenly, that man who was predictable in his schedules, who arrived home around the same time, who had his agenda clear, now has last-minute meetings constantly. Work lunches that didn't exist before suddenly become essential. Commitments with friends who were barely mentioned now become extremely important. And here's the key. It's not that he has new commitments, it's that these commitments are erratic, unpredictable, and almost always without much advance notice. He tells you in the morning about something in the afternoon, or gives you 2 hours notice that he'll be late. And when you ask for details, the answers are vague. It's a meeting with a client, but he doesn't remember exactly the name. It's lunch with the team, but he can't tell you exactly who's going to be there. From a neurobiological standpoint, what's happening is fascinating and terrible at the same time. His prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain responsible for planning and impulse control, is working overloaded. It's constructing narratives, inventing believable excuses, remembering which lie was told and to whom. And the problem is, our brain isn't designed to sustain complex lies for extended periods. That's why inconsistencies start appearing. He tells you he was in one place, but then mentions a detail that doesn't fit with that location. Or he tells you a version of something, and days later the version is slightly different. Freud would call these parapraxes, those seemingly accidental errors that actually reveal unconscious truths trying to surface. The man isn't intentionally creating these inconsistencies. His overloaded cognitive system is simply failing to maintain perfect coherence between the fabricated reality and actual events. The unconscious, in its wisdom, keeps trying to expose the truth that the conscious mind is desperately hiding. There's something else many women notice but don't know how to interpret: weekends or days off. Before, when he had a free day, the first thing he wanted was to be with you, make plans together, enjoy that couple time. Now, suddenly he has 1,000 things to do. He needs to go to the gym precisely that Saturday morning. He has to help a friend with something urgent. He needs to run errands that could perfectly wait. And when you suggest accompanying him, there's subtle but clear resistance. He says yes, but creates obstacles. It's going to be boring for you. It's going to take too long. Better you stay resting. This fragmentation of time is necessary for him because maintaining an affair requires physical time, but also mental space. He needs moments when he doesn't have to be acting, when he can relax and be himself with the other person, or simply be alone processing the complexity of what he's experiencing. Psychoanalytic theory tells us about the concept of psychic energy. Freud called it libido, though he meant it in a broader sense than just sexual energy. This energy is finite. When a man is dividing his psychic energy between two relationships, between two emotional realities, there's inevitably less available for the primary relationship. You start receiving less time, less attention, less real presence. Even when he's physically with you, his mind is elsewhere. You notice it in his absent gaze and how you have to ask him to repeat things because he wasn't listening. And that sensation that there's an invisible glass between you. This isn't coincidence or stress from work. It's the natural consequence of a psyche operating in a state of constant internal war. The ego is exhausted from mediating between conflicting realities, and that exhaustion manifests as emotional unavailability. The third psychological signal that Freudian psychoanalysis illuminates is projection and defensive attacks. This manifestation is among the most painful but also the most revealing. Suddenly he starts accusing you of being distrustful, controlling, jealous, or even of being unfaithful yourself. This is what we call in psychoanalysis projection, one of the most fundamental defense mechanisms Freud identified. His brain, loaded with guilt from what he's doing, projects those feelings toward you. When you ask something completely reasonable, like why he arrived late or who he was with, instead of responding normally as he did before, he immediately gets defensive. And not just that, he counterattacks. He tells you he can't live with so much control anymore, that you're suffocating him, that it seems you don't trust him. And he does it with such conviction that you end up feeling guilty for having asked. This mechanism is automatic. His psyche needs to protect itself from cognitive dissonance, that unbearable psychological discomfort that arises when our actions contradict our values and self-image. He knows he's doing something wrong, but acknowledging it means confronting an intolerable image of himself. So the ego finds a solution: justify his behavior by blaming you. If you're controlling, he's justified in seeking freedom elsewhere. It's twisted logic, but very effective for his mental tranquility. The most dangerous thing about this signal is how it erodes your sense of reality. When someone you love constantly tells you you're exaggerating, that you're imagining things, that the problem is your distrust, you start doubting yourself. This is gaslighting, a term that didn't exist in Freud's time. But the phenomenon he would have recognized as a manipulation of another person's perception of reality to avoid facing uncomfortable truths. Watch the details carefully. When before you could talk about anything calmly, now any topic that touches on his freedom, his privacy, or his movements generates immediate tension. And observe how he reacts when you present concrete evidence of something that doesn't add up. Instead of explaining calmly, he gets furious. He accuses you of spying on him, of being toxic. This disproportionate rage at legitimate questions is a huge signal that there's something to hide. Freud taught us about displacement. When emotions directed at one target get redirected toward another, safer target. The anger he should be feeling toward himself for his betrayal, the guilt that should be directed inward, gets displaced onto you. You become the problem, not his actions. This protects his ego from having to face the painful truth about what kind of person he's becoming. The fourth manifestation involves extreme fluctuations in sexual desire and physical intimacy. This signal is particularly complex because it can manifest in two completely opposite ways, and both are significant. Either sexual desire disappears almost completely, or it increases unusually. Both extremes tell a story about the divided unconscious. The first option, diminishment or disappearance of desire. Suddenly, that man who used to seek you physically now avoids you. He's always tired, always has a headache, there's always an excuse. And when there is intimacy, he's physically present but mentally absent. From a neurobiological standpoint, this makes sense. If there's another person he's having relations with, his brain is releasing all that dopamine and oxytocin with her. His desire hasn't disappeared. It's just changed objects. Freud spoke extensively about the cathexis of libidinal energy, how our psychic energy attaches to different objects and people. When a new attachment forms, energy necessarily gets withdrawn from previous attachments. It's not infinite. Many also experience post-coital guilt. After being with the other person, the guilt is so intense that the last thing they want is intimacy with you. The unconscious is screaming that something is wrong, and the body responds by shutting down desire. The second option, unusual increase in desire. Suddenly, he's more sexually active than ever, and you think, this can't be infidelity, but it can be. This happens due to compensatory guilt. His brain tries to compensate for the betrayal by being more physically attentive. Also, the novelty of another relationship can increase his overall libido, and that increase spills over toward you. The excitement and dopamine rush from the new relationship temporarily elevates his sexual drive across the board. What's crucial is observing quality, not just quantity. When there is intimacy, does he look into your eyes? Is there that emotional connection that existed before? Or do you feel like he's having sex with a body but not making love to you as a person? Freud emphasized that true intimacy involves not just physical union, but psychological communion. When that psychological element disappears, what remains is mechanical, empty. Pay attention also to moments of everyday affection. The kisses when greeting each other, spontaneous hugs, caresses while watching something together. If these small gestures have diminished or disappeared, it's because the emotional bond is weakening. These micro-intimacies are actually more revealing than sexual activity because they're unconscious expressions of genuine attachment. When attachment shifts elsewhere, these gestures naturally decline. The fifth psychological manifestation involves changes in personal appearance and self-care. This signal is fascinating because it reveals something profound about male psychology and the process of attraction. When a man is initiating a relationship with another person, his brain experiences what we call the intense attraction phase. There's massive release of dopamine, noradrenaline, and other substances that generate that sensation of euphoria, energy, wanting to impress. Suddenly, that man who used to put on whatever for work is now paying much more attention to how he dresses. He buys new clothes without it being a special occasion. He starts using cologne when he didn't before, or changes the one he used for a new one. He styles his hair differently, goes to the gym more, takes better care of his diet. And all this without any apparent reason or without it being for you. Here's the key. These changes aren't for you. If he comes home dressed up in a special way but then immediately changes into comfortable clothes at home, it's because that grooming was to impress someone else during the day. If he debuts that new cologne but doesn't seek your opinion about it or doesn't care if you like it, it's because he chose it thinking of someone else. From evolutionary biology, this makes complete sense. The male brain, when in active conquest mode, activates all display mechanisms. It's like the peacock spreading its tail. He needs to show himself as attractive, well-groomed, desirable, and that effort requires energy and attention that he previously dedicated to other things or to you. Freud would understand this through his concept of narcissistic investment. The psychic energy we invest in our own image and presentation changes based on who we're trying to attract. Observe also if there are changes in his physical activity. Many men, when in a new relationship, suddenly find motivation to go to the gym more frequently, to lose weight, to tone up. And when you ask what motivated these changes, the answers are vague. I want to take better care of myself. I want to be healthier. But the truth is, there's a very specific biological impulse behind it. He wants to look good for another person. There's something more subtle, but very revealing. How does he groom himself when going out without you versus when he's with you? If before, when you went out together to dinner or an event, he would dress nicely for you, and now, when he goes alone to supposed work meetings or outings with friends, he dresses better than when he goes with you, there's a clear signal. His grooming effort is being directed toward another person. Also pay attention to changes in his personal hygiene habits. If suddenly he's more meticulous with his shaving, with his dental care, with his hands, even with details like trimming nails or grooming body areas he didn't care about before, all this is related to wanting to present himself in the best possible way to someone new. The unconscious drives these behaviors because the psyche is preparing for potential intimate encounters, something many women notice but don't know how to interpret: the phone in the bathroom. If before he didn't take his phone to the bathroom and now he always does, it might be that he's taking advantage of those moments of privacy to communicate with the other person. But it also might be that he's more concerned about personal hygiene because he knows he might have intimate encounters with another person and wants to always be prepared. Changes in appearance can also include things like skincare, using products he didn't use before, even changes in body or facial hair that aren't for you. When you ask about these changes, he might say he simply wants to look better for himself, that he's going through a phase of loving himself more. And it might be partially true, but the question is, why now? What motivated this change precisely at this moment? There's one additional very specific signal: smell. I know it sounds strange, but it's real. Your brain knows your partner's natural smell, that unique combination of their skin, sweat, pheromones. When someone is intimate with another person, even if they shower, there are subtle changes in their body odor. It might be from a perfume that stays impregnated, from different soaps or products used in another place, or simply because the chemical changes in the body when with another person alter natural smell. Freud understood that our senses, especially smell, connect directly to primitive brain regions associated with memory and emotion. That's why a smell can instantly transport us to another time and place. Your olfactory system knows your partner's baseline scent profile. When that changes in ways that can't be explained by normal circumstances, your unconscious registers the discrepancy, even if your conscious mind hasn't named it yet. Trust your sense of smell. It's wiser than you think, connected to ancient survival mechanisms that protected our ancestors from threats and deceptions. Before reaching the primary signal I promised, at the beginning, let me address something crucial. All these manifestations we've examined aren't definitive on their own. It's possible your partner is going through work stress, depression, health problems, or simply a difficult phase, and some of these signals appear without there being infidelity. That's why it's so important not to jump to hasty conclusions based on a single isolated signal. What should truly alert you is the combination of several of these manifestations occurring simultaneously, and above all, the pattern change. If your partner has always been reserved with their phone, that's their personality. But if they've changed from being open to being hermetic, there's something there. If they've always had an irregular routine because of work, that's normal. But if suddenly a predictable routine becomes chaotic, there's something there. Changes are the key. Freud emphasized that in psychoanalysis, we look for patterns, for departures from baseline functioning, for disruptions in established equilibrium. The human psyche seeks homeostasis, a stable state. When that stability is disrupted by major internal conflicts, like living a double life, the system shows strain. These 5 manifestations we've explored are precisely those strain indicators. They're not moral judgments, but psychological realities. The unconscious cannot sustain deception indefinitely without cost. That cost manifests in observable behavioral changes that accumulate and intensify over time. And now, the primary signal, signal 0, the one that appears before all others and is probably the most important of all. Your intuition is screaming that something isn't right. This is the signal most ignore, and then when they discover the infidelity, they say, "I knew it. Deep down, I always knew." Your intuition isn't magic or paranoia. It's your brain processing thousands of microsignals, facial expressions, voice tones, inconsistencies in stories, changes in patterns. All this gets processed at an unconscious level and generates that visceral sensation that something doesn't add up. That discomfort in your stomach when he tells you something. That voice saying, "This doesn't make sense." For years, women have been taught to distrust their intuition, to seek concrete proof before believing what they feel. And when proof finally appears, months have passed torturing themselves mentally, thinking they're crazy. Freud revolutionized psychology by validating the power of unconscious perception. He demonstrated that we know far more than we consciously realize. Our unconscious mind processes vast amounts of information that never reaches conscious awareness, but still influences our feelings, our gut reactions, our sense that something is off. Your intuition is the result of millions of years of evolution. It's your threat detection system, and when it tells you something isn't right, it deserves to be heard. This doesn't mean acting impulsively, but it does mean paying attention, observing, and trusting yourself. There's something very specific when your partner is unfaithful. You lose that background sense of security. Before, there was underlying tranquility. Now there's constant unease, like walking on thin ice. That sensation doesn't appear from nowhere. Your brain generates it because something fundamental has changed. Many tell me, I feel like I don't know him anymore. Exactly. When there is infidelity, that person you share your life with is partially a stranger. There are parts of his life being hidden from you, and your brain captures the incongruence between what he shows and what he really is. If your intuition is telling you something, don't silence it. Don't tell yourself you're exaggerating. Your intuition deserves investigation. That means having honest conversations, asking direct questions, and observing responses not just with your ears, but with your entire being. Truth always finds a way to surface. You can deny it, you can try to convince yourself everything is fine, but your body and mind know. And living in that dissonance is exhausting and destructive to your mental health. Freud taught us that repression, pushing uncomfortable truths out of consciousness, requires enormous psychic energy and eventually leads to symptoms. Your anxiety, your sleeplessness, your constant worry aren't signs you're crazy. They're signs your unconscious is trying desperately to make you face a reality your conscious mind is avoiding. What should you do if your suspicions are confirmed, but he denies everything? This is one of the most frustrating and painful situations. You have all the signals, perhaps even some evidence, but when you confront him, he denies everything categorically. He makes you feel like you're crazy, like you're inventing things. In these cases, you must trust your intuition and what you've observed. If all these signals are present and your instinct tells you something isn't right, you're probably correct. You don't need a confession to validate what you know. Sometimes persistent denial in the face of clear evidence is itself an answer. And you must decide if you can continue in a relationship where there's no honesty. Freud would say that a relationship built on repression and denial cannot sustain genuine intimacy. Without truth, there's no real connection, only illusion. This content isn't meant to destroy relationships or sow distrust where none exists. It's for you to trust yourself, to validate what you're feeling, and to have the necessary tools to make informed decisions about your life and emotional well-being. If after watching this you realize these signals are present in your relationship, breathe. Take your time processing this information. Seek professional support if you need it. Remember that whatever decision you make after this discovery, the most important thing is that you make it from self-love and not from fear of being alone or starting over. Life is too short to live it in a relationship where there's no honesty, trust, and mutual respect. You deserve a relationship where you don't have to constantly search for betrayal signals, where you can sleep peacefully knowing the person beside you is being faithful, not from obligation, but from genuine love and commitment. If it turns out your partner is being unfaithful, know something. You will survive this. I know right now it seems like your world is crumbling. I know the pain is intense and feels unbearable, but you have more strength than you believe. Thousands of women have gone through this before you, have healed, and have found happiness again, whether rebuilding their relationship or finding their path alone or with someone new. You will too. Always remember that true love shouldn't make you feel anxious, insecure, or constantly in doubt. True love gives you peace, security, a solid foundation from which to grow. If your current relationship isn't giving you that, then you need to honestly ask yourself if it's the right relationship for you, regardless of whether there's infidelity or not. Your mental health, your peace of mind, your ability to trust and feel safe in love, these are not negotiable. They're fundamental to your well-being and deserve protection above all else.